Hi, everyone, and welcome to journey number 12. And today we have Brandon Archer on. And Brandon, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Thanks for the invite on the show. Pretty happy to be here.
Of course, yeah. And, we were talking a little bit before this, and, a world that I've jumped a lot into the last year has been men's work and, modern masculinity, call it, and, what a man should be or should look like. And so I'm really excited to have that conversation with you today. But to start off, I'd just love to hear a little bit more about your story. So if you can just kind of tell everybody, a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now, everything like that.
Yeah, for sure. Where to start? Currently, I am a men's work coach, specializing in men's communication and connection with their spouse. I do run two Samurai Brotherhood squads, two men's groups, and I've started a Facebook community geared towards married men as well. But how I got here is a journey. It's definitely a journey, and it starts. When does it start? Probably when I got divorced 10 years ago, and it was like reset buttons. Like, holy crap! I was 35 when I got divorced or separated, and I felt like I'd moved backwards to like I was 20 years old again, just like complete fresh start. Started plugging away, just doing life, career, all that good stuff. And I actually woke up in the hospital one day and I'm like, what just happened? And it ends up, I had an accident on my bike, but I have no memory of that day.
Mm,
Actually, that's not true. I remember the day, but not how I ended up in the hospital. But that really, it really shook me. I couldn't see straight. I couldn't speak. I was pretty worried that it's like, oh no, like what's next? Because unfortunately, they just sent me home from the hospital, like you're on your own. And it really caused me to pause, and nothing mattered at the moment other than my kids were quite young at the time. And I just spent time with them because I couldn't go to work. There's no way. But I did recover from that, got back in the workforce, just kept going, same old grind, wasn't happy with my job, no real purpose, just other than making some money to pay the bills. And that happened in Vernon, the concussion, Vernon, BC, and Kelowna is about 50 kilometers away. And I moved and got back into cycling. That was before I had kids. I rode a lot, raced. I got back into it, got in really great shape, was training in April of 2016 with some friends. And I actually had a heart attack while I was riding my bike. And that's where things really, really changed. No physical damage to my body. They did all the tests and they're like, you're fine, which doesn't make a lot of sense because I just had a heart attack. But I asked the cardiologist, can you have a heart attack from stress? And he's like, absolutely 100%, but we have no metric for that. So I'm like, wow, I know what my life was like. I know how I felt all the time. I'm going to say stress caused that heart attack. So it really was another chapter in my journey of I need to figure out how to not be stressed. I was very fortunate enough to get into a relationship with a woman that was very caring and allowed me some space to grow and like explore what I needed to explore. And through that relationship, I grew a lot. Not only, being introduced to ideas that I'd never heard of before. There's some books that like absolutely changed my life. The Voice of Knowledge, The Four Agreements, The Power of Now. Those books are like amazing. And she introduced me to those books. I'm pretty grateful for that. I also met a mentor through her, an older gentleman, or older than me, and really, a little more of a spiritual edge to things, not religious, but spiritual.
hmm
And just help guide me on like, how do you live life more in line with what you actually want as a human, not based on what you were taught. So it really started a path, and I was like soaking it up. But I got to a point where I'm like, I have no clue what to do next. Like, I'm tapped out. I can't read another book, and like, I need some help. My good friend Mike Shaw introduced me to David Detta, Way of the Superior Man, and blew my mind, like absolutely blew my mind about ideas of masculinity and manhood. And that led me to another book, No More Mr. Nice Guy. And in there, he mentions men's groups are a great way for a man to um, have their blind spots exposed. Searched in Kelowna, couldn't find anything. Ben Goreski, who's Evolving Man and Rising Woman, who's Shalina, his wife, through their Instagram accounts, he was just launching Samurai Brotherhood online, the very first one. That's a men's group based in Vancouver. And I watched the intro video, and I ended up joining the very first. It was a beta test. They had no clue if it was going to work online. Ends up it does work. But changed my life, like changed my life. That container was so powerful to tap into other aspects of myself and sit in a room of other men that share similar stories, similar struggles, and helping each other heal in that is beyond powerful. There's actually no words that I can use other than every man needs to try it. And that journey led me to heal so rapidly, so fast, step into my masculinity in a way I was looking for, but there's no guidebook for this stuff. There should be. Well, there's a few now, I suppose. And yeah, now I lead 2 groups. I am a men's coach because of that process. And that was only less than 2 years ago.
I love that. And backing up a little bit, I think one of the hardest places to be is that starting point. And so I want to stick on that just for a second here of, so you have that, call it a life altering experience, with the heart attack, with the first injury. And you said it was a concussion, the first one on your bike, and
Yes.
then the heart attack. And then you found, a couple of books that you said really impacted you heavily. How did you start that journey though? You knew that you needed to make change, and you knew that you wanted to see, call it like a different side of things, but how did you start that journey? Was it kind of just in the dark, like just let's read some books and see what I like and go from there? Or what was your starting point, and how did you navigate those first couple of however long it was, months?
Great question. I was dissatisfied with where I was at. And you touched on, in our pre-interview, just like the three C's that I've gotten. Courage. It takes courage to go, I'm not happy with where I'm at. I need to start figuring this out. So I knew if I just kept doing the same thing, I was going to get the same results. We've all heard that type of quote before. And I just kind of took a step forward and not knowing what it was. I didn't know what it was. I was fortunate enough to have that mentor I mentioned to help guide me a little bit. So how did I get started? I just took one step. Have conversations with people that maybe had a different life experience than me, listen to my story, and they're like, hey, you might enjoy this book. So really I got a little vulnerable, a lot vulnerable, but that took the courage to like take that first step and saying, I'm not happy with where I'm at anymore. I want to change it without knowing what it looked like.
I love that. And, I resonate a ton with, just doing things that are out of the norm for you when you're trying to break a pattern. And, we talked a little bit about it before of, how I met Andy and Nuke and those guys. And, it was such a chance instant of I randomly came across a bio on Instagram of Andy, and it talked about his organization, the King of Hearts. And I looked them up, and they happened to be doing a meetup, like 2 weeks away. And it was just that, I'd been talking with my therapist, before then of, what do I do now? Like, I want to grow. I want to try new things. Like, what should I do? And basically she just said, try new things, right? Like randomly try things and see what you like, see what you don't like. And so I just kind of went, yeah, fuck it. I'm going to try it. And I'm going to show up. And if I don't know, I'm not going to know anybody there. I'll be there by myself, but it's fine. If I don't like it, I don't like it. If I do, I do. And from that one decision, it has led to, you know, some of the closest relationships I now have in my life. It's led to enormous growth. It's led to men's work. It's led to so many different things, just from trying and breaking that pattern. So I resonated a ton when you were talking about that.
Yeah, I love it. Did you feel you had to tap into some courage to do that?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And it's like I still remember the physiological response that I had going into that where, you know, on paper it's just a meetup, right? We're just gonna go, we're gonna talk about modern masculinity. I in my head I'd said I'm not gonna say anything. I'm gonna sit there, I'm gonna listen. Like if I like it, I'll come back, maybe I'll talk next time, but I'm not gonna do anything here. And it wasn't a big deal until I pulled up and was about to park. And then my body starts going like, you don't need to be here, like we can just leave, nobody will know if you don't show up, right? And so it did actually take a lot of courage just walking through those doors. And of course with a lot of conditioning, and I think a lot of us try to do is, okay, let's put that cool face on, like nothing bothers you, you're fine walking into this, you're going to be cool, calm and collected. And on the inside, actually like the heart's pounding and like trying to control your breath so you don't feel like you're going to pass out. But yeah, definitely needed that courage.
Awesome. Good stuff. I love it.
Yeah. And one of the other things that you brought up, which I also think is super important, and was something that, I'd never really given much thought to before, was that idea of blind spots and having people in your life that can point out those blind spots to you. And also, kind of prefacing too that one of the interesting points was that I'd always thought that blind spots were negative, right? Where, your blind spot is something that you're not good at, that you don't know that you're not good at it. However, there's also the flip side too, of sometimes people see the positives in you that you don't see yourself. And so that's been so important to me, and something that, I've made the commitment to myself of making sure I have people around me that can point those blind spots out to me. And I'd love to just hear a little bit more from you on, your experience with blind spots, why it's so important, to have people show them to you. And if there were any big blind spots that you discovered in doing this work about yourself.
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. It fits into my life right at the moment. I had a event yesterday that brought out some more blind spots for me. Um, I think blind spots, it's a very good term, but I think it's helpful to explain kind of and maybe another take on it. So as we grow up as a child, teenager, we are not really in general taught to create our own belief systems. We are shown what we believe. We are exposed to things and we create neural pathways based on that. But as our cognitive ability goes along in life and we expose to other things, we have a choice now to choose something different than what we were taught. But for me, speaking from my experience and then working with other men, that is so, those paradigms are so deeply embedded in us. Many times we don't know what we don't know, or we don't know what we think we know that doesn't align with society, or we have not been shown that, oh, hey, you have another choice on this particular subject. So to me, that's what a blind spot is. It's what is my belief systems that I don't even know may not jive, or I've not had somebody say, hey, have you ever thought about this belief you have? Is that really what you believe? So to me, that's a blind spot. I like how you turn it around, and we don't necessarily see the good in ourselves either. That's also a very good take on it. Blind spot. I don't know if there's another word we could use, but it's similar. We don't know how people interpret us until we ask or are put in a container like a men's group where there's some pretty direct feedback. And we often can be very surprised what people think of us on both ends of the spectrum. I don't want to say good or bad, but honest. It's like, hey, Brandon, we see this in you. And you're like, what? Like, I had no idea whether that is like a thing, a trait that could be construed as negative, or a trait or a quality that's like, wow, I had no clue I carried that greatness in me.
Yeah, no, I resonate with that a ton. And, you know, you speaking about that, one of the biggest ones for me was challenging the stories that I tell myself about other people and how they view me. Right. And, rooted in insecurity. A lot of times I would tell stories of this person doesn't like me, or
Mhm.
like, oh, they seem off, I must have done something, right? And whatever it might be, or we just don't connect, right? Like we're not similar, whatever it might be. And then being in that container with that honest direct feedback, sometimes it is something that you have no idea that is bothering them. Sometimes it is about you, a lot of times it's not, right? A lot of times it's something external that has absolutely nothing to do with you. Or on the flip side, they're having the same stories in their head, from the opposite side. And you realize that you both just assume that, there's something wrong, like that you don't connect with each other, when actually you're both longing for that connection with each other. And so that's been a very interesting experience for me. And yeah, again, just something that I think is so important. And I think that type of feedback that I've received in a men's group as well has been very different for me. As you said, a lot of times it can be very direct, and it can be about sensitive things, and it can be about, some of our deepest insecurities. However, knowing that it's rooted in deep love is a very interesting, at first seems like a contradiction, but in the end actually leads to huge safety and like a freedom of, I know that this man has nothing but love for me, and that's why they're giving me this feedback. And so now I need to actually look at it, right? And it helps those defenses come down, for me at least. So yeah, something super super important.
Yeah, absolutely. When you talked about stories, it made me think of stories or the narratives running in our subconscious. And where did those come from? What are the stories that I am telling myself, and realizing that we have a choice if we want to believe that or not. Is it easy to change the story? Not necessarily. It's possible, though. You've probably experienced it. I've had it happen for me. I've watched it happen with other men. You can change the story. You can shift the story. But what you shared about other people's reaction, we perceive it's about us. That's actually nothing to do with us. And that is a big thing that a men's group can help people understand, is they may have a reaction to what I say, but that's one of their stories and their narratives playing out. That's a big concept for people to kind of make a shift from. It's like, oh, I said this thing, they got offended. And it's a little bit difficult for some people to grasp at first. It's not about the words you said. It's about the nervous system reaction that they had, because it mirrored something that happened in their childhood. But it's their subconscious trying to protect them from having a similar experience because it was painful or unpleasant. And that's why I like men's groups, because we drag those things out into the light and go, hey, what's that thing you just said? Why are you reacting so strongly to what Bob said to you? Sometimes it is that a person being like really aggressive and rude, but not as often as we think.
For sure. Yeah, I was having a conversation, I think probably about 2 weeks ago now, and one of the things that that came up in the conversation was whenever, kind of taking the approach of whenever you're triggered by something, instead of, telling the other person, eh, it's actually more of a reflection inside of why was I triggered by that? And instead of trying to, work out that one situation, call it like, let's get to the root of that. Like, what about that triggered me? Why am I triggered, and where did that come from, in my past? And, like you were saying, a lot of it comes from our childhoods or past experiences where now our body is trying to protect us from, experiencing that pain or, perceived danger.
Yeah, I think that is such an important thing for people to understand. And it's a paradigm shift. Like some people are probably listening to us going, "What are you guys talking about? No, Bob is rude to me." Okay, maybe Bob is rude, but why do you have that reaction in your body? And as you know, it's 2020, we have all this technology. Humankind is like doing amazing, amazing things. At the end of the day, there's still part of our brain that is primitive. I call it lizard brain, they call it old brain. There's lots of different terms, and it is trying to protect us. And once that people acknowledge that, you can own kind of your behavior and your reaction. And it can be a choice, but that understanding of my body is actually trying to protect me right now. It recognizes something that was unpleasant, and Bob is saying something that's very similar. Oh, reaction mode, and it's fight, flight, or freeze, which a lot of people have heard of. But to actually like go down that rabbit hole and start to understand how it affects you is powerful, because you can change your life once you start understanding those things. That, oh, I just like yelled at my partner or my girlfriend or whoever. I'm like, man, what was that about? Quite often an hour later, the next day, you're like, that is not in alignment with what I want to do or how I want to treat that person I love. Yeah, you're right. But your old brain kicked in and like pushed pretty hard because it was afraid that something really unpleasant was going to happen. So I love that subject because you can change it. You absolutely can change how you react.
For sure. And, something just, a personal experience that came up for me was, finally, I felt like it was a big breakthrough, and it's such a small thing, again, looking at it from the outside in, but internally, it was so huge on a complete shift of how I've always thought my entire life. And I don't remember exactly what it was. I was trying to ruminate on, trying to think about, trying to work through a problem, or um, you know, it might have been around childhood wound or whatever it might be. Of like, I want to work on this. I know that I'm struggling with it. I want to work through it in my brain and think about it, but I couldn't concentrate on it. And whenever I try to think about it, my brain would automatically switch to a different topic, something super surface level, right? And I was getting frustrated of like, no, I want to work on this. And it just kind of clicked in my head. And I went, oh, this is a defense mechanism. My brain is trying to protect me right now. And instead of meeting it with frustration and shame and anger, for once, I acknowledged it and thanked it and, appreciated that it was a defense mechanism. And it is my brain trying to protect me from trauma, from hurt, from pain. And it just created a lot of peace, and I just wanted to share that because it seemed to be a breakthrough on working with that lizard brain and trying to work with it instead of against it.
Yeah, and you can work with it. That is such a great discovery you made, because you talked about anger, frustration, that you can't tap into it. But it's because it's trying to protect you. It's like, no, 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 you can't go there. You can't go there. We need this defense mechanism. But as a person develops themselves and their skill set and whatnot, you can switch from anger, frustration. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It just takes consistency. Oh, I welcome that trigger. I welcome that defense. And it takes a little bit of practice, but your subconscious, your lizard brain will start trusting you. And it's like, okay, I'm going to let you look at this now because you've been really consistent in taking good care of yourself and your mental health and your whatever you want to call it. You've been journaling, you've been meditating, and your brain starts to relax and sees that you have the capability to handle whatever that trigger, that wound, that thing it's been protecting you from. It's like, yeah, you're ready. Now you can have a look at this. And that's actually I think what happened to me yesterday is a layer got peeled back of something that I thought I didn't need to deal with in my past. And I'm like, damn it, here it is. Hey, I guess I'm ready for this.
Yeah.
And going to start digging into that. But what do you I have a question for you?
Yeah.
How do you work on that side? Do you have like a daily practice that you use?
I'm very bad for daily practices. And I'm also very bad for being in my head and over intellectualizing. And, it's kind of what's gotten me through my life. And so I've overly relied on it. I can think this through, I can figure it out. Right. And so for me, I don't have anything specific. It's been a lot of, with the work that I'm doing in men's group, in therapy, just and trying to take it into practice in everyday life and looking for opportunities. For me, the biggest one has been focusing on self compassion. And so that's where that breakthrough came from, because I would always kind of, find myself in that, call it a shame spiral where, shaming myself, I'm not good enough, like you should be better at this, you screwed this up, whatever it might be. And that was always my automatic go-to. And so I've done a lot of work on my self-talk of, instead of, meeting problems or perceived failures with shame, it's been, trying to show myself love and kindness in those instances. And so sometimes if I can't get negative thoughts out, then I'll journal. They're just kind of stuck in my brain there. I'll journal to get them out. And I find that's a good practice for me of, once they're physically out of my brain, now I can have those positive thoughts. And then I'll transition in that journal from the negative. And it's all of the negative. It's not trying to like, yeah, but, or justify or like force a positive. It's like, no, I'm going to write out every single negative thought that's going through my brain right now. And then I feel almost like like it's gone. I feel some space, and then I'm able to go into those positives and truly feel like, they're authentic and not forced.
Yeah, it's amazing. Men, we're pretty smart, right? And we like our brains. We like to stay in there and like solve problems, but the things we're talking about are not necessarily solved in your brain, right? They're hiding in your body and your nervous system, and you need to go from in your head and drop down, neck below, and some magic can happen. So yeah, you mentioned journaling. I think that's where I started. Actually, that was one of my first practices, and I do it daily now. And there's so many different variations and things you can do with it. It's powerful if you tap into that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, I've actually, it's funny enough, I've been thinking about it for, a couple weeks, but this last week specifically. And I've always fought against getting into my body. Even as I've started to, I still feel myself fighting against it and telling myself that story of, I'm just not that kind of person. And I've said it on here before. I'm like, it just doesn't work for me. However, for this past week, I've accepted of, I think this next phase, I really want to explore getting into my body. And some of those practices that I've told myself I don't like or that they don't work for me, and just, actually giving them a shot and trying them out. And, call it proving it to myself that, some of them will work and some of them won't, but I don't know until I actually try.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That makes me think of this really cool 3-step framework that Danielle Grant taught me.
Okay.
She's a mindset coach, and I'm just going to run through it and then it'll make sense. And it's questioning your subconscious, questioning yourself. It starts out, what do I believe to be true? Why do I believe it to be true? And what do I want to believe to be true?
Mm,
So I love that, like for a journaling prompt, right? And it's like, well, why do I believe I don't want to journal? You
yeah.
know, and you go through it. And what I've watched happen with men is you're asking your subconscious these questions. You may not get an answer right away, which sounds kind of odd, but if a person writes that down every day, and before you know it, like you have an answer. And that's the power. And it goes back to what we mentioned about paradigms and belief systems, is like we were kind of handed them. But is that what we want? Is that what we want to choose? And the only way to find out what we want is start asking some questions. And it might sound really interesting. It's like, wow, if it doesn't come right away, well, it's clearly not what I think. But we've talked about lizard brain and old brain. It's protecting us, man. And where are we operating from? And if you can start thinking about, there's different parts of your brain doing different things for us, we have like the cognitive ability to almost ask the other parts of our brain, what's going on? Why are we doing that? And I just love that framework. Like I gave her full credit for that, Danielle. I took a course with her in the spring. I'm like, wow, nicely done. That framework is very useful to me personally.
I really love that, actually. I might have to try it out myself. Um, so transitioning a little bit, it's kind of, call it the overarching topic that we've talked about a lot, but not specifically in this conversation, is the idea of what a man should be, right? Of what society tells us men are supposed to look like, what a strong man looks like, how we're supposed to react, everything like that. And, challenging that, um, how you've challenged it. And I think a really interesting one too, actually, is when you were speaking earlier about your partner, your new partner, and how she encouraged you and allowed you to do this exploration
Mhm.
of, different areas of your life and things you haven't looked at before. Um, and just speaking a little bit to how, in your opinion, how partners can support, and whether it's a romantic relationship or even friends, because it's also hard in a group of men, right? A friendship group. Sometimes it's hard for one man to go and explore and break the story of not only themselves within that group, but as men as a whole. And so your experiences with what men should be and how to support people when they're looking to make that jump, and whether that's from the outside looking in or as a man yourself when you're looking to challenge those beliefs.
Yeah, man, this has been, yeah, this is the question right here. This is it, right? As what does it mean to be a man in 2020? Like it's not clear. It's totally not clear. And I think that it's a question each man is asking himself, but maybe not talking about it. And I think that's what your question is how do we get that moving? And I do think that the lone wolf or being by yourself is not the way it's going to work. There needs to be discussions, there needs to be support in order to explore that. It's not, in my experience, has not been something you can figure out on your own. Um, and even what is it? Like masculinity, you say that word masculinity, and I honestly believe 95% of people, when they hear masculinity, their brain automatically puts toxic in front of it because of the conditioning society has given us over the last 40, 50 years. And that's really unfortunate, and it's really unfair because it's kind of tied our hands behind our back with exploring what it means. And because we all crave it, like men know you carry this energy in you and you're like, I really want to tap into this. I can feel it, but I don't know what to do because it's portrayed as bad. Thing is we all want it. Women want healthy masculinity, but again, like I said, we hear toxic in front of it, and it's just it screws up our perception of what that is. There's toxic femininity too, which many people don't even know that. So the balance is the exploration of understanding masculine and feminine, in my opinion, and understanding we all have both sides. Doesn't matter, it's not gender specific. Women have masculine traits and feminine traits, as do men. And what we all want is balance. It's not, I'm just going to be masculine all the time. No, and you don't want your partner, your female partner, to be feminine all the time. That's not actually what we want. But what I've watched happen, and it's like a pendulum. It's like, men have been a little more, I'm not going to say in their feminine, but they haven't been able to tap into their masculine. And it's like, oh, it's like you let the pendulum go. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. You kind of want to stop at the middle, but ends up going over into the too masculine. But I think that needs to happen so you can find the center and what that looks like. I love this subject, by the way, and you got to stop me if I just keep going on too long, because it is so important. And how to tap into it, you've got to start getting really curious about even what it means. What does it mean? And there's lots of resources out there now. Maybe not in the mainstream, but there is some out there now. And you've got to want it. You've got to say, I'm not really happy with where I'm at, and this resonates, and I feel that energy, that masculine energy in me that wants out, but I don't know what to do, because it feels like it's going to come out as anger. It feels like it's going to come out as being way too aggressive. And yeah, you're right that you carry that. Each man carries that. And how do we temper that? How do we control that? That's what we want. That's the magic. That's the balance that I was talking about.
Yeah. And that's rings so true for me. And just, that controlling it, the first part. And, it was something that we talked about in our men's group here in Calgary, where, having a container to almost play with it and test it out. Right. And I think that's such a tough thing, because, for men that have, never tapped into their anger, shown anger, gotten mad at people, or, have always shied away from conflict. For me, one of my fears, and so this was conditioning for me growing up, in my household, whenever there was a fight, there was no little fights or disagreements. It was 100%. Like, there's yelling, there's screaming. It's 10 out of 10 every single time. And realizing through the work that I put that onto my external life, of if I ever disagree with someone, or if I ever show anger, I go to 10 out of 10. That's what's going to happen. I don't want that. And so therefore I might as well not even try or show any ounce of anger. And so having that container where you can kind of test out that red line, right? Where, I'm going to show anger. And if I overreact a little bit, that's okay, because I'm in this container where the men know and love me and know what kind of person I am, and can also help me pull it back, right? Of like, well, you went a little bit too far, or like, no, I felt like there was still some in you, right? And kind of, again, finding that pendulum and finding that balance. However, it's different if you're just out on the street and you have a disagreement, right? And with some, in extreme circumstances, very dire consequences, right? You hear stories all the time of people losing control, and going to jail even sometimes, right? And whether that be just assault, or even, sometimes killing somebody, because they've never explored that area of themselves, and they lose control. They don't know how to pull it back, right? And so important for the containers. And so the other piece that I just wanted to speak about, and get your thoughts on, is what I view the story that is told to men by society as being, right? And for me, what I started to realize is that I've felt the whole life the only emotion that a man is allowed to show is that anger, right? Um, Never sadness, never vulnerability, and being that rock for other people, right? Being empathetic for others, allowing others to support. Supporting others, allowing others to come to them with their problems, being that rock, being strong, being stoic, right? And starting to challenge that of like, why can't we show emotion? And in my view, as I've evolved it, for me, true strength is being able to show your flaws and your vulnerabilities and still being strong and being okay with them, right? Being in control of your emotions and being able to tap into your different emotions, not just one or two. And so, just your quick thoughts on that. Is that a similar story to what you've heard?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. And that's why, you said men have only been, or society has said anger is masculine, basically. So, but that's toxic. That's toxic masculinity. That's not healthy. There's many different attributes of masculinity that are healthy that we were not shown how to exhibit. So I agree with you. The vulnerability aspect is huge, and this goes to, I kind of touched on. It's a gambit. It's the balance. It's the masculine and feminine traits balanced. What is a true rock, or as a man, it's showing that vulnerability to your partner, to your children, feeling the feels that you need to do, and coming back to that rock without having to go to, staying in that rock and having these emotions build and build and build. Because if you take those, the sad, the boys don't cry type thing into your manhood, that is going to end up surfacing as anger. And that's not what anybody wants. It's not what anybody wants. But society has put this narrative that's like, and it is changing. It is changing for sure. But the narrative is that, it still is boys don't cry, which is totally unfortunate. And it just manifests in anger or assault. And you see it, like people see these things and they're like probably nodding their heads right now as they're listening to this going, holy crap. Yeah. Bob, I don't know why I keep picking on Bob today, but it works. He's stoic all the time and he's this rock, and then he gets angry sometimes, but I never see him cry. I never see him feel sad. I never see him have empathy for anyone. It's not what anybody wants. It's really not what anybody wants. And it's our job, you're doing having a podcast and getting the word out there. That's awesome. Men's groups, like we're starting to feel the shift in society. And I was speaking, one thing I like to share on this subject from a man's viewpoint, listening to us going, you guys don't know what you're talking about. That's not what my wife says. I want to share a story with you. So it happened to me recently. She's a coach in my life. She's a woman as well. So she has some verbiage that helps explain a little bit more, like she can express this strength of a man and how vulnerability plays into it. And I think this is gold right here. I have personally been on the last 6 months really putting a lot of effort into understanding masculine and feminine polarity between a man and a woman. I've been putting a lot of effort into that. And she shared with me, because I'm like, I have the tools. I can deal with all my own emotional stuff now. And I have men's groups. I have ways I can process it. But what she shared with me is when a male partner has those tools, can take care of themselves, but still shares and shows the emotion of what he is going through with his female partner, it builds trust and connection with her, because now she feels like, whoa, Bob's done a lot of work and Bob can handle his stuff now. I trust Bob like a lot. And as a woman, I can now bring him what I have emotionally to share with him. And I know he can handle it. I know it's not going to trigger him. And that was like the most beautiful thing I've heard in a long time. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I've always known vulnerability was a superpower, but I didn't know how to put it into words.
Yeah.
So she just like blew that paradigm. I'm like, oh, okay. So there's the balance that we were talking about. You still get to be like, a rock, but you need to share what's going on for you because it will actually improve your relationship, not make it worse. She will not view you as weak. She will view you as stronger. And that is going to be a very powerful thing for men to switch in their relationships.
Yeah. No, I love that a ton. And, just thinking about it too, what comes to mind is when you're in that place of putting it into practice of being vulnerable, bringing up the things that are bothering you, it also stops you from having that, shattering of that rock moment where it's become so much and, you can't hold on to it anymore and you completely break down. Right. And I think a lot of times, sometimes those are, necessary because you need to release that energy. I think that there's a lot of shame that goes around with those as well. Of like, I've always been seen as this strong, like, stoic individual. And all of a sudden I'm, on the ground crying and can't control myself. Right.
Mhm.
And also seeing that swing, people don't know what to do. Right. Those people that are around you don't know how to support you because you've never asked for anything in your entire life. Right. And so getting into the practice of, those vulnerability, bringing vulnerability into everything that you do and sharing what you're struggling with, however, still showing that you have the strength and tools to get through it. And sure, and being okay with asking for help when you need it. Right. Asking for help doesn't mean that you're helpless. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, actually, I just wanted to touch on another point too quickly, because we talked a lot about, the man that always shows anger and like, that's the only emotion that he can show. And, when you're speaking, another instance has come up several times. I've just seen, in random places and conversations on social media, the other side of it, of those people that are always said to be happy. They're always happy. They're always worried about other people. Nothing was ever wrong. They never shared anything. And then that person commits suicide. Right. And again, a very extreme case, but a really, almost call it grounding or bringing gravity to the situation for me.
Mhm.
And hearing those stories, a couple of stories like that from people that are very close to me, and then seeing them just in the ether of, you know, how not showing anything is wrong and the battles that we're all, waging that nobody knows about. And again, that's another piece and the opposite side of why I think this conversation is so important. Of you don't have to act like everything's okay and you can ask for help. And just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, yeah. I do. I had a friend who his daughter committed suicide, and they had no indication that that was going to happen. So I know what you mean. It's dangerous, right? And it's shame. You touched on shame a few times, and shame is dangerous, but it's also powerful. It's also powerful because we want approval from other people. And when we don't show emotion, many times it's because we think we've had these narratives and paradigms given to us that, well, if I show this emotion, I will not be liked. And then there's shame that comes in with that. It's like, oh, they're going to tell me to suck it up. Oh, they're going to tell me boys don't cry. And this goes for women too. This is not gender specific to that. I was going to say spiritual bypassing, and I don't think that's appropriate here, but I know what you mean. Those people that are always happy all the time, that's not the human experience. That's impossible. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Can't. And when we all probably are listening to this thinking, oh yeah, Jane and Sam, like, wow, they're always like on this super high level, high energy, always happy. Maybe reach out to those friends. Maybe ask them what you can do for them. I think that's a really good point you bring up, because it does concern me when I see people like that, like a lot. And I had a one man in our men's group, and he was going through some hard stuff, and all he shared was like, oh, but I got it, I got it, I got it, I got this. And I'm like, I said, dude, I don't trust you right now. I don't trust it. Like, where's the anger? Where's the sadness for what you just explained?
Yeah.
But he's never had that invitation for that to be okay and not judged. So I think you bring up such a good point. But we have the power to help those people with just a simple like question,
Yeah.
just an opening of a new container with them. It can be one-on-one, it can be coffee, it can be just listening. And yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. It's not really something that's been on the forefront of my mind, but now it's going to be.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's something I've been thinking a lot about. And I do come back to shame a lot because I realized just how much it controlled my life.
Mhm.
Um, and, after looking within, starting looking outward and seeing how much it controls other people too, and how many unhealthy behaviors tie back to shame, and trying to remove shame from, like my interactions. I cannot agree with something and not shame somebody for it. Right.
Right.
And trying to meet them with empathy, not shame, right? And feeling that it also leads to more progress of when you create that safe environment for someone to, say whatever they need to say, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, whether it's, just sharing something that they're ashamed with, and not meeting them with shame, meeting them with love,
Yes.
is just so powerful. So yeah, thank you for picking up on that. And unfortunately, we're running out of time here. There was a topic we didn't get to too much, which was that masculine versus feminine energy, and we might need to do an episode dedicated
That's
just
a
to that.
whole episode right there.
Yeah. So my final question to you here is: what does this next phase of your journey look like?
Oh man, that is an amazing question. The next phase of my journey is scaling what I'm doing to help men. Yeah, that's my next phase, is getting that out there and helping more men. As my personal like inner journey, there's a whole bunch of things, and I don't think that's what you were asking, but yeah, there's
However
there's
you want to take it.
there's blocks that have shown up for me, like subconscious thing, all the things we talked about, new ones came up, and now I'm like, all right, I don't know how, I don't know what. I'll probably start using that framework I told you about. Like, I need
Yeah,
to figure out why I think those things and what I want around those subjects. But as far as my journey and moving forward and taking men's work further is working with Andy more. Actually, we're going to do some more retreats. That was amazing. But also, how can I help more men? Because this men's work it's new. It's pretty new. But I've created some things that I think can really help, and they are helping. I've got clients that's like, wow, this is working fantastic. And they touch on a lot of the things we've talked about, the anger and all those things that we don't address. So, yeah.
awesome,
Right.
amazing. Where can people find you, connect with you? Where's the best place for them to do that?
Probably the easiest thing is brandonarcher.com. From there, you can find all my social media. There's links on the bottom of the page to Facebook and Instagram. Pretty active on Instagram. I have a Facebook group for married men, which I'm really proud of. That's really what I'm focusing on, is men who have been in a relationship and have kids and feeling stuck in connecting with their partner. I was there. I have tons of friends that are there, and I'm like, that is a demographic that we can really help a lot. Really help give them some tools to connect with their partner. That's what we want. That's what you're talking about, shame and everything. It's all about, we want to connect as humans. We
Yeah.
want to. We want to. Nobody taught us how to do that.
Yeah.
They just didn't. So yeah.
Awesome. I'll put that link in the description. And I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on. I had a blast, and we'll chat soon. Okay.
Yeah. It's great meeting you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.